The ghost joins Act 3, Scene 4 at a really interesting moment. Hamlet is at the acme of his domineering presence. He's blocking the stage for Gertrude by kind of talking over her. If we look at applying things like rhesus maxims, for example, you can clearly see that he is flouting the maximum of quantity and really kind of blocking the floor for Gertrude here. He's ripping into her new husband, calling him a king of shreds and patches, a king of bits and pieces. There's no holistic ideology. There's no like consistent message to his monarchy. He's a man of tatters. He is, you know, what is left over after the great reign of the previous king. And then the ghost enters, and Hamlet is completely humbled. He's reminded of the fact that he is not a great man. Yes, he can dominate his mother, but he has no control, or he has not been exhibiting control over his own fate, his own destiny over the previous, you know, however many acts. And then there's this really interesting ambiguous line. He says, "Save me and hover o'er me with your wings, you heavenly guards. What would your gracious figure?" And what I find really ambiguous here is the repeated use of the direct address, because is he talking exclusively to the ghost here? Are all those yous and yours aimed at the ghost? Or is he speaking to two different factions? Is he asking angels to save him and watch over him whilst he speaks to the intimidating and frightening presence of his father? What would your gracious figure? And from my personal perspective, I find the view that he's speaking to two people much more persuasive, because I see Hamlet in this scene as suddenly intimidated, suddenly infantilized, suddenly really humiliated, brought low, belittled. And this is when Gertrude feels at liberty to say, "Alas, he is mad." Now, in the Laurence Olivier adaptation that we watched in class, it was patently obvious that at this point Gertrude was relieved. Because if Hamlet is not mad, then her husband is a murderer and her son is cruel. But if he is mad, she can write this off as the behaviour of a disturbed mind. And that's probably something that's quite a balm to her, something that makes her feel better, obviously. So there's a tone of relief in that performance from the Laurence Olivier adaptation on film. Hamlet ignores the exclamative of his mother, and he continues to speak to the ghost. "Do you not come your tardy son to chide, that lapsed in time and passion lets go by the important acting of your dread command? Oh, say." He refers to himself as a tardy son. Tardy means late. And then he explains with this embedded clause, lapsed in time and passion. So that means he's let time go by, and he's also let his passion, perhaps it's like his vengeful passion, go by. It's sort of deteriorated, his desire for revenge here. So he's excusing the reason for his tardiness in acting. And you've got that verb there, the important acting of your dread command. He's let it go by. And so we're reminded of the fact that Hamlet has not been acting on the revengeful promise that he made to his father. What he has been acting is mad. He's been acting strangely. He's been acting cruelly. He's been performing, but not actually doing the things that he's been supposed to be doing. And it comes back to this idea that we talked about in class, that he experiences the world through his imagination first before it can be manifested into reality. You can certainly see that in that verb acting. He has been acting, just the wrong kind. The ghost then opens with an imperative, so it's clearly trying to establish to Hamlet who the most dominating presence is. Do not forget. This visitation is but to whet thy almost blunted purpose. So you've got an extended metaphor there of a sword or a dagger being sharpened with a whetstone. And so not only is Hamlet being reminded, he's being reminded of the violent purpose that he has to enact later in the play. At the caesura there, the end stop line, you can see that the ghost then digresses. He starts to talk about Gertrude, and the tone is really different, and it's so peculiar to me that the ghost is so cruel and so unfeeling towards Hamlet, and then so piteous and so pathetic towards the character of Gertrude. And that cruelty of the ghost to the son perhaps speaks to that idea of transgenerational trauma derived from the Lindsay Turner adaptation that Cumberbatch started. And Gertrude, watching her son go through this, is very perplexed. She says, "How is't with you? What's going on with you? That you do bend your eye on vacancy, and with the incorporeal air do hold discourse. Why are you talking to nothing?" You can see the abstract noun, vacancy. There's nothing there. The noun phrase, incorporeal air. Incorporeal means unbodily. So you can see that at this moment, the ghost is not visible to Gertrude. It is only visible to Hamlet. So you've got a kind of theatrical choice, a dramaturgical decision to make here. Are you going to show the ghost or are you not? Are you going to make it a voiceover? How are you going to manifest on the stage the fact that Hamlet is experiencing this ghost as if it is there and Gertrude is not? So there is a kind of question mark there. And in the Laurence Olivier scene, which we watched, you'll notice that it was a high angle camera which Hamlet was talking to really emphasize the fact that the ghost dominates him, that the ghost intimidates him, and he is this lowly subject kind of knelt down beneath it. And we only hear the voice of the ghost in that particular adaptation to really emphasize that it is a kind of psychological interpretation in that film. And Hamlet is incredulous that Gertrude cannot see it. On him, you've got the epizeuxis there. And again, another exclamative, "Look you, how pale he glares." And then we've got this line which tells you just how poorly Hamlet conceives of himself. He says, "His form and cause conjoined." So the way he looks and the cause behind his actions, so his motivation, conjoined together. Preaching to stones would make them capable. If he, with his presence, with the righteous reason for its presence, even if he was to talk to a stone would act on his behalf. And yet Hamlet has not. So that particular line within this dialogue indicates to you that Hamlet at this point is really seeing his own paucity of action, his lack of characterization as a hero, his difficulty to embody all of the characteristics which his father holds highly in a son. Then he says, "Do not look upon me, lest with this piteous action you convert my stern effects. Then what I have to do will want true colour." And at that point, I'm not sure who he's talking to. I don't know. Is he talking to Gertrude? Is he talking to his father? And I mean, the obvious suggestion would be that he's talking to his father and he's frightened of it. This idea that perhaps he would cry instead of bleed. Maybe that's because he's intimidated by his father. But perhaps if he's talking to his mother here, "Do not look upon me, in case your piteous action convert my stern effects, in case your pity makes me softer, and what I have to do will want true colour." And want true colour means not look right. He's going to do it for the wrong reasons. Now, if you take that interpretation, what I have to do will want true colour, it suddenly becomes a quotation that has some potency if you want to read it through the Oedipal complex. The idea that his mother, looking at him piteously, suggests to him that in killing Claudius, he is doing it to obtain his prize, his repressed desire. So, I mean, you could read that in a couple of different ways, depending on how you view Gertrude and Hamlet's relationship. Okay, so at this point, Hamlet, when the ghost leaves, has a sequence of exclamatives which perhaps demonstrate to us that his behaviour is quite heightened, quite extreme at this point, and Gertrude feels free to comment on the nature of his behaviour. You can see she makes a couple of deictic points, and if you've got words like this, that, these, those, there, this, here, they're words that indicate like where something is or what something is, and they need a bit of context. So with those deictic words, this and this, she's obviously gesturing to his behaviour. She wants him to look at himself. And in this moment, you kind of got a bit of a parallel with earlier in the scene when Hamlet was talking about holding up the glass to Gertrude. That's what she's trying to do here. She's trying to say, look at yourself. This is the invention of your brain, the coinage of your brain. This bodiless creation, so this imagined form, ecstasy is very cunning in. Madness is trying to secretly gain entry into you through this imagined presence. So we go from the start of the scene, Hamlet is trying to show Gertrude who she really is, and Gertrude is likewise trying to do that here. Although I don't know whether the tone is quite so cruel as it was when Hamlet was doing that to Gertrude earlier. This could be caring, this could be nurturing in the way that those lines are delivered. But Hamlet does not accept that reading of his behaviour. He says, "It is not madness that I have uttered." So we've got that clear declarative. He's establishing to his mother that however he is behaving, madness is not the root cause. Mother, for love of grace, lay not that mattering unction to your soul, that not your trespass but my madness speaks. So he says, look, don't put a nice balm and ointment onto your soul that suggests that it's not your sin that's making me mad, but madness itself that is causing this behaviour. And I think particularly the noun unction has connotations of disgust and repugnance, like he's disgusted by his mother, and the notion that she would try and misdirect the blame and suggest that it's not something that's owed to her. And so Hamlet's trying to address that. It will but skin and film the ulcerous place, whilst rank corruption mining all within infects unseen. So he's saying, if you interpret my actions to be madness, that'll just temporarily skin and film, just vaguely cover what is actually a deep corruption within you. And again, we've got quite disturbing language: ulcerous place, rank corruption, infects, rancor. We've certainly got a semantic field there of disease and corruption. And at this point, he invites his mother with a couple of imperatives to save herself, to ask for salvation, confess yourself to heaven, repent what is past. So at this point, perhaps he's trying to align his behaviour more along the lines of the suggestion of the ghost who did not want him to harm his mother, who did not want him to attack her. So there's a suggestion that through his words, he is attempting to be kinder to her, but the way that those words come out, like sandwiched between this extended metaphor of disease, implies that his heart's not really in it. The disgust for his mother is still absolutely apparent, despite his wish for her to save her soul. So the disgust that's apparent in Hamlet's dialogue when he's talking to Gertrude is often sort of vaunted as being emblematic of the repressed desires that he feels for her. I'm sure there's probably been a time where we've really liked somebody, and the way that we've manifested that is by acting in the opposite way. And that's the kind of Freudian reading of Gertrude and Hamlet's behaviour here. He's so unconsciously like desirous of her that he's really suppressing that deep within himself, and the act of repression is enabling this criticism to come to the fore. So he gives us some advice. throw away the worser part of it. Gertrude had just said, look, you've broken my heart in two, you've cleft my heart in twain, we'll get rid of half of it, which is a metaphorical way of saying, get rid of Claudius. The advice he then goes on to offer is, go not to mine uncle's bed, assume a virtue, if you have it not. So here he's telling her that she should not be going to bed with, obviously, Claudius, and we've got some foreshadowing that I'm not sure Gertrude is quite bright enough to pick up on. Refrain tonight, and that shall lend kind of easiness to the next abstinence. So the next abstinence, that noun phrase, indicates to us, and it should to Gertrude if she's not probably still suffering from the kind of after effects of the cruel behaviour of Hamlet earlier on in the scene. The next abstinence implies that at some point Claudius is going to be taken away from her. So he's foreshadowing, he's predicting for her that, you know, Claudius is going to be killed and he is going to be abstaining from sex with him. So why not just start the path now and don't go to the uncle's bed tonight? So Hamlet is foreshadowing what will come later. He also says, assume a virtue if you have it not, which is reminding us that Gertrude is somebody who definitely, you know, has lost her innocence. We go back to that get thee to a nunnery scene with Ophelia, the idea of beauty making honesty a bawd. You can see that in the way that he's interacting with Gertrude here, she is the source, she is the proof of that gendered perspective on women, that misogynist view on women in Hamlet. He definitely perceives her to be a beauty who has been, an honest woman who has been pricked through her beauty, through her attractiveness to Claudius, into becoming a bawd. At the end of this piece of advice, he then gestures towards Polonius, says, look, I do repent, I feel sorry for what I've done, but heaven hath pleased it so to punish me with this and this with me. So at this point, despite his repentance, he acknowledges that this is destiny. Killing Polonius was destiny, and he has to answer well the death I gave him. So there is some more foreshadowing here. He knows that there will be an answer to this. There will be revenge being sought, because in killing yet another father, Laertes and Ophelia have grounds for revenge against him. So there's an unhealthy, disturbing cycle of violence, of patricide, if you like, although it's not quite patricide because he's not his father. But of fathers being killed anyway within this particular play. So the cycle continues. Gertrude is completely, what's the word? I think she's shocked. I think she's exhausted after experiencing this scene. I think she does not know who she is or who she is with Claudius. She asks Hamlet, what shall I do? And Hamlet tells her what she shouldn't do, not this. So what comes in this speech is what he's saying, do not do this. Not this. Do not let the bloat king tempt you again to his bed, pinch wanton on your cheek, call you his mouse, and let him for a pair of reachy kisses or paddling in your neck with his damned fingers make you ravel all this matter out, that I essentially am not in madness, but mad in craft. So at the opening of this speech, he describes Claudius in really disturbing kind of lexis as the bloat king. And that adjective literally means sort of fat and flabby, but I think the imagery is kind of like of a toad, something bulbous, something disturbing, slimy, something gross in that imagery. Don't let the bloat king tempt you again into his bed. So obviously the verb tempt reminds us of the fact that he's previously been referenced as a serpent, and this kind of continued link with Satan and sort of the devil. And then the language becomes, again, quite graphically sexy, sensual, sexual. Pinch wanton into your cheek. So don't let him pinch wanton into your cheek, of course. Which cheek is quite ambiguous, so it could be more sexual than I'm originally making it. Don't let him call you his mouse. Don't let him for a pair of reachy kisses. And reachy, if you look in your side notes, means filthy, like disgusting. And the paddling into your neck with damned fingers. Don't let that sexual manipulation force you to ravel like a piece of wool coming undone this matter out. So he's saying, don't be sexually manipulated into telling Claudius that I am not mad, I'm faking my madness. I'm not mad, not in madness, but mad in craft, like creation or invention. And clearly you can see here the incredibly low opinion he has of his mother, coming back to that idea of her being made into a board. This notion that the most likely way that she would go and blab on Hamlet is probably if somebody was paying her some like sexual favours. There's something incredibly misogynist in that view, and cruel and really belittling for Gertrude. Now we've got that caesura in the middle of the line. "'Twere good you let him know, for who that's but a queen fair sober wise would from a paddock, from a bat, a gib, such dear concernings hide." And here he's sarcastically saying, oh, it would be really great if you did tell him, because of course, what kind of queen can't tell her familiar? Paddock, bat, gib. I think you might have heard of Paddock before in Macbeth. I think it's one of the familiars in that. So that rhetorical question is actually painting Gertrude not just as a prostitute, which the previous sexual imagery does. He's also portraying her as a witch. And Claudius is her bloat king, her kind of toady, batty, gross little familiar. Really nasty language here. He also uses this quite difficult image at the end. No, in despite of sense and secrecy, unpeg the basket on the house's top, let the birds fly, and like the famous ape, to try conclusions in the basket creep and break your own neck down. So he says, look, if you decide to spite my request for your sense and secrecy, you could, like the ape, creep into the basket where the birds fly from on the top of the house, and thinking that you can fly yourself, break your neck. So there's a threatening kind of moral to this little narrative that he tells to Gertrude here, that if she were to unleash the truth of his antique disposition, there would be some kind of violent conclusion to her actions. Gertrude promises that she won't say anything, obviously, and Hamlet reminds her that he has to go to England. We've got this interesting speech towards the end of the scene where he says, "There is letters sealed, and my two schoolfellows," which is Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, "whom I will trust as I will adders fanged, they bear the mandate. They must sweep my way and marshal me to knavery." And everything I've highlighted in yellow here tells you Hamlet is hugely suspicious of all of this. He knows he's not being sent on a holiday. He knows that he's not being sent to go and get the tribute from England. There is a kind of secondary purpose to this trip to England. The letters are sealed, and that verb already has a tone of suspicion. Why are the letters sealed? Why can't he know? Why are those two carrying the sealed letters? He's the son of the Queen. Why do they bear the mandate? Why do they hold it? Why is that their job? So you can see with the verb sealed, with the pronoun they, like they bear the mandate, there is a great deal of suspicion from Hamlet's perspective, and he knows they plan to marshal me to knavery. So there is some trickery, some deceit, some kind of trap that's being generated through Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. But Hamlet is feeling supremely confident of himself here. He plans to make sure that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern will be hoisted with their own petard, which is a quote that has a life outside the play Hamlet now. It just means when you get trapped or you get kind of hurt by your own trap or by your own plan to hurt somebody else. It's when your plans kind of come back and smack you in the face, hoisted by your own petard. So he has this plan to meet their knavery with his own knavery. And then we've got this lovely rhyming couplet in the middle where he says, "Oh, 'tis most sweet when in one line two crafts like acts of deceit directly meet." So you can see that he is perfectly willing to use Machiavellian tactics to address Claudius's Machiavellian tactics. We can see that he's more than a match for Claudius in this particular scene. "This man shall set me packing, I'll lug the guts into the neighbour room." And at this point, he's referring to Polonius. And the language is quite disturbing. "I'll lug the guts." There's an assonant sound there, ugh, lug, guts, which tells you of his disgust or his carelessness. It depends on how you want to read it or view it or enact it if you're an actor. And then he comments on Polonius. He says, "Indeed, this counsellor is now most still, most secret, and most grave, tripling, who was in life a foolish, prating knave." And so, whilst Polonius dies, we are very aware of the fact that to some extent his death was his own cause, his own choice. He hid behind the arras, he used espionage more than once or twice, three times in this play, and as a result, being still secret and grave for one of the very few times in the play was a consequence of the fact that, you know, he went behind Hamlet's back. He sought to outsmart Hamlet, and now Hamlet essentially has the ability to get the last word in, to call him by his most critical interpretation a foolish, prating knave. So Polonius is kind of reduced to the character of a fool and an idiot by his death, where if he had met success, he would possibly have been seen as the opposite.